In 2025, the Trump administration implemented a series of aggressive measures targeting international students seeking to study in the United States. This policy shift marked one of the most significant changes to U.S. immigration law in recent years. Over 6,000 student visas were revoked almost overnight, leaving students, universities, and their families in a state of confusion and anxiety. The stated reasons for these revocations included alleged violations of immigration rules, suspected involvement in criminal activities, or even tenuous links to organizations that the administration deemed a national security concern. In addition to these revocations, new procedures were introduced that made obtaining a student visa far more complicated. International students were now required to provide access to their social media accounts, a policy intended to give authorities deeper insight into applicants' personal beliefs, affiliations, and activities online. Critics immediately raised concerns about privacy violations and the potential for political or ideological discrimination. This move sparked protests on university campuses across the country and led to lawsuits challenging the legality of such invasive requirements. Universities themselves were caught in the crossfire. Harvard University, for example, faced temporary restrictions on accepting international students due to administrative disagreements over compliance with the new rules. Other prestigious institutions, including Columbia, Brown, and the University of Pennsylvania, also experienced pressure to limit programs that might be considered controversial by the administration. Departments involved in international studies, Middle Eastern studies, or political science were particularly scrutinized. The administration argued that these measures were necessary to protect U.S. national security and ensure that the student visa program was not exploited for purposes other than legitimate education. However, legal experts highlighted that many of these revocations appeared to target students who were entirely compliant with U.S. immigration laws. Federal courts began issuing preliminary injunctions to prevent arbitrary deportations, emphasizing that each student should have the right to due process. For international students, these changes created an unprecedented level of uncertainty. Many faced the possibility of having their education interrupted or being forced to leave the country. Families who had invested years of planning and financial resources into supporting their children's studies suddenly confronted the risk of losing everything. The international student community began to explore alternatives, including studying in other countries such as Canada, the United Kingdom, or Australia, where immigration policies were perceived as more stable and predictable. While the administration portrayed these policies as a necessary security measure, the backlash from universities, students, and civil rights organizations painted a different picture. The situation highlighted the delicate balance between national security and the fundamental rights of individuals seeking education. The controversy surrounding the Trump student visa block quickly became a global story, raising questions about whether the United States remained a welcoming destination for international talent. The Trump administration's student visa restrictions quickly faced legal scrutiny. Federal courts began to intervene, issuing injunctions to prevent the arbitrary deportation of students whose visas had been revoked. Lawyers argued that the administration was violating constitutional protections, including due process and equal protection under the law. These legal battles highlighted the tension between executive power and the rights of individuals, setting the stage for high-profile courtroom clashes. For many students, the fear of losing their legal status in the United States became a daily reality. Some students had already paid tuition and housing fees for the upcoming semester, and now faced the possibility of being forced to return home. Others were enrolled in programs critical to their careers, including medical, engineering, and technology fields, where interruptions could have long-term consequences. International student communities began organizing legal aid networks, sharing resources, and even raising funds to help those affected navigate the complex legal system. Universities responded in a variety of ways. Some provided letters of support, offering to vouch for students' enrollment and good standing. Others attempted to adjust academic calendars or offer remote learning options, though such solutions were often limited by immigration rules that required physical presence on campus. The uncertainty placed immense psychological stress on students, many of whom were already dealing with the challenges of living in a foreign country, adapting to a new culture, and coping with high academic expectations. Beyond the legal and logistical consequences, the visa restrictions had a profound effect on the perception of the United States internationally. Countries whose students were disproportionately affected, including several in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, expressed concern that the U.S. was no longer a welcoming environment for talent and innovation. Diplomatic tensions arose as governments demanded clarification on the criteria for visa revocations and assurances that students would not be unfairly targeted. The social media requirement introduced another layer of anxiety. Students were now required to provide login credentials for multiple accounts, allowing consular officers to review their online activity for indications of ideological alignment or security risks. Critics warned that this could lead to self-censorship, stifle free expression, and unfairly penalize students for personal opinions expressed online. The policy also raised ethical questions about privacy and the boundaries of governmental oversight in the digital age. Meanwhile, student organizations and advocacy groups launched campaigns to highlight the human stories behind the statistics. One student from Egypt described being forced to leave a cutting-edge biomedical research lab after having her visa revoked, while another from India shared how he had invested his life savings in tuition and housing, only to face deportation threats days before the semester began. These stories were amplified in international media, fueling debate about the fairness and consequences of the administration's policies. The cumulative impact of these measures began to ripple across American society. Research institutions, which relied heavily on international students for research funding and innovation, expressed concerns that the policies could undermine the country's scientific and technological leadership. Businesses that employed international graduates also warned of potential talent shortages in critical industries. In essence, the visa restrictions were not only affecting individual students, but also threatening the broader ecosystem of education, research, and innovation in the United States. In summary, the legal challenges, personal hardships, and societal consequences of the student visa blocks revealed a complex and contentious landscape. The human impact extended far beyond the individual students, affecting families, universities, and even the global perception of the United States as a destination for higher education. The controversy surrounding these measures continues to unfold, raising questions about the balance between national security and the rights of international students seeking to pursue their academic dreams. As the dust settled on the immediate chaos caused by the Trump administration's student visa blocks, questions began to emerge about the long-term implications for international education in the United States. Many experts warned that these policies could have lasting effects on the country's ability to attract top talent from around the world. Historically, international students have contributed significantly to American universities, not only in terms of tuition revenue but also through innovation, research, and cultural exchange. A sustained perception of the U.S. as an inhospitable environment could lead to a decline in applications and a redistribution of talent to countries with more welcoming immigration policies. Universities, anticipating ongoing uncertainty, began implementing contingency plans. Some established alternative pathways for students to maintain their legal status, such as transferring to online programs temporarily or offering deferral options. Others invested in partnerships with foreign universities to create dual-degree programs, allowing students to begin their studies abroad and complete them in the U.S. once restrictions eased. These strategies aimed to mitigate the immediate impact while maintaining the institution's global reach and academic competitiveness. For students planning to study in the United States, the situation underscored the importance of preparation, awareness, and flexibility. Legal experts recommended consulting immigration attorneys before applying for visas, ensuring all documentation is accurate, and maintaining a clean compliance record. Students were also advised to keep detailed records of their academic enrollment, housing arrangements, and communications with their universities. In addition, they were encouraged to consider alternative destinations for higher education, such as Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, Germany, and Singapore, which have robust programs for international students and more predictable immigration processes. The broader implications extend beyond individual students. Companies and research institutions that rely on international talent must now navigate potential disruptions in staffing and innovation pipelines. Some technology firms expressed concern that restrictions on student visas could result in talent shortages in critical fields such as artificial intelligence, engineering, and biomedical research. Academic collaborations with foreign partners also faced increased bureaucratic hurdles, making it more difficult to exchange knowledge and resources. The political debate surrounding the visa blocks has continued, with both supporters and critics voicing strong opinions. Proponents argue that the measures are necessary to ensure national security and protect domestic employment opportunities, while opponents insist that they unfairly penalize innocent students and undermine the country's global standing. Internationally, these policies have affected U.S. diplomacy, with several governments issuing statements urging fair treatment for their citizens. Despite these challenges, the resilience of international students has been remarkable. Many have found ways to continue their education, sometimes relocating temporarily to online programs or other countries before returning to the U.S. when possible. Student advocacy organizations continue to provide support, legal advice, and mental health resources, emphasizing that students are not alone in navigating these difficult circumstances. In conclusion, the Trump administration's student visa blocks of 2025 represent a watershed moment in U.S. immigration and education policy. The immediate consequences disrupted thousands of lives and created legal, academic, and emotional turmoil. The long-term implications, however, may reshape international student mobility, influence the competitiveness of American universities, and alter the perception of the United States as a global hub for higher education. For students, families, and institutions alike, the key lesson is clear: adaptability, preparation, and awareness are essential in an increasingly complex and unpredictable immigration landscape.